Hi. So I can finally sit down and do this. I have been wanting to do this for some time, during this whole quarantine, and I'm finally getting a chance to actually sit down and do this. Um, I wanted to record my birth story with my son, my first son. So basically, let's just get right into it. So, throughout my whole pregnancy, it was pretty much normal until around 7 months. So, I did work in retail. So, I was always on my feet, always going. And at 7 months, right after my baby shower, I started to have contractions. Now, obviously, I'm like, okay, these have to be Braxton Hicks because, it's too early. Um, so I started having contractions and I was timing them. And I basically was like, okay, these are feeling a little different. So I'll just go to the hospital and get it checked out. When I got there, they were pretty much not taking me serious. They were like, no, these are Braxton Hicks. This is your first baby. You're not giving birth, it's nothing wrong with you, basically it's Braxton Hicks, and kind of ripped me off. And I was like, no, I still, want to check and see. And so they did end up hooking me up to the machines, and it was turning out that I was starting to start labor, which is obviously not good because I'm only 7 months and he's not fully developed yet. So I had to stay there for a little while, and they gave me a shot that would stop my contractions. And they pretty much told me if my contractions don't stop and I end up going into labor, they would have to give me a different shot that would boost his lungs, because that's like number one priority. So he'd come out and be fine. But at that point, I think I was 70% effaced and 1 centimeter. But my contractions did end up stopping from that shot, but they only stopped for like a couple weeks because I ended up still going in early. But it was just a couple weeks later. But how that happened was I went to my doctor's appointment on a Friday. I went to my doctor's appointment and they checked me, and I believe, I was 1 centimeter. And I was like, okay, that's how I was a couple weeks ago, so it's nothing new. And as soon as I left that appointment, I was literally contracting. Like, I don't know what happened, if she, accidentally swept my membranes or something, I don't know. But she was like, go home. And then as soon as I left out the building, I started having contractions. But I'm like, okay, I've been through this before. It's just Braxton Hicks. Everything will be fine. And, I was just timing them, and they were just getting really uncomfortable. That whole Friday night, I was just contracting, contracting, contracting. And I'm like, this is too uncomfortable. And I think they got down to like maybe 5 minutes. And that was Saturday morning now. It was like 5 or 6 in the morning. And I, woke my boyfriend up, and I was just like, these aren't stopping. It's something going on. Like, these are not stopping, and they're 5 minutes, 6 minutes apart now. And I think we should go to the hospital. So we drove to the hospital, and they were pretty much like, nope, this is your first baby. You can't be having contractions. And they checked me and were like, oh, you're 90% effaced, but you're still 1 centimeter. You can be like that the whole last, 4 weeks or 3 weeks of your pregnancy. So, don't worry about it. And I'm just like, okay, but these are really uncomfortable, and it's 5 minutes apart. The rule of thumb is they have to be 5 minutes apart for an hour. They were like, no, this is your first baby. It's not, that's not what's going to happen. Most first time moms and end up having to get induced past 40 weeks. And I'm like, okay. And they pretty much packed me up and told me go home and wait till they get down to 3 centimeters. I mean, 3 minutes apart. So I'm like, okay. I go home and I specifically remember going home, and a couple hours later, it was 3 p.m., and my mucus plug came out. And I'm just like, okay, now my mucus plug came out. So I called the hospital and I was like, okay, I just left there this morning. You guys said I was, 1 centimeter and 90% efface. My mucus plug just came out. So what's going on? And they were like, oh, your mucus plug can come out the last 2 weeks of pregnancy. So that's not a real good indicator. I'm like, okay, so I've been having contractions consistently. My mucus plug came out. I'm not in labor, but I'm getting it phased, and I'm 1 centimeter now. I'm like, okay, so, all right. So I'm just gonna have to tough it out. And I was just contracting. This is all on Saturday. Now we get to Saturday around like 9, 10 p.m. and I'm still contracting, and they're like painful now. And I just had to step away. I stepped away from my boyfriend. I stepped away from everyone, and I just was trying to get my life together. And my father came and he saw me, and he seen how much pain I was in, and he was just like, no, hell no, let's go. We're going to the hospital. If anyone knows me, I am a daddy's girl. And he was just like, no, we're not doing that. And we went to the hospital. He like drove to the hospital, jumped the curb, and picked me up out the car and took me into the emergency room. Now, when we got to the emergency room, it was me, my mother, and my boyfriend. My father went back to the car because he does not do anything with seeing me in pain. That's just not what he does. So we were waiting there, and it seemed like forever. Like they were just taking forever. And I'm like, y'all don't know how far I am. Y'all don't know what medical issues I have. Why are y'all taking forever to come downstairs, get me in a wheelchair, and take me up to labor and delivery? Nevertheless, time goes by, and I'm just contracting. At this point, my contractions are like 3 minutes apart, and I'm just contracting. I go upstairs finally. They check me in. They're like, okay, we're gonna observe you for a little bit. It's your first baby. I doubt you're having a baby now. You probably just have backs in his contractions. And I, basically explained to them everything that was going on. Early, in 7 months, I almost had him. They had to give me a shot. Early, I was in the hospital. Yesterday was my doctor's appointment. I was 1 centimeter. Now they check me. I'm 2 centimeters fully effaced. So I'm like, okay, I am progressing from this morning. Doesn't that mean something? I lost my mucus plug. These are all signs that they teach you in the classes. And they were just like, no, I don't think it is. And they were just like really nonchalant about it. I'm like, yeah, this is my first baby, but like something's obviously going on. I'm like, okay. I'm just sitting there having contractions. Now, my whole pregnancy, I was like, I don't want no epidural. I'm going to try to go natural. And when those contractions were sitting, I was like, no, give me an epidural. I need an epidural. And my boyfriend and my mom were laughing at me. They were like, you said you was going to go natural. I'm like, forget that I said that. That is a no-go. I'm not doing it. I need an epidural. But because I was only being observed, I couldn't get an epidural. I can only get epidural if I was admitted. But because they were just like, no, I'm not in labor, they didn't admit me. So I was still being observed, and they left me alone for a little bit, and I was still contracting. And I was just like, I have to go to I feel like I gotta go to the bathroom. But I'm hooked up to things. So I called my nurse back, and I will never forget her name. Her name was Patience. And she came, she was like, you feel like you gotta go to the bathroom? She was like, that usually means that you're about to push. And I'm like, all right, well, I feel like I got to the bathroom. So she left out. She was like, don't get up. Hold on, I'm going to get the doctor to come back and check you. She left. I didn't listen. I got up and I went to the bathroom just to see from my own mind, like, what's going on. Didn't go to the bathroom. So I came back to the bed and the doctor came in a little bit after and she checked me. She was just not trying to listen to what I said. She just did not understand that I know what I'm feeling. I was like, I feel like I have to use the bathroom. She was like, I could check you, but I don't think you've progressed. And I was having contractions, so I was like, can you hold on? Because I'm having a contraction. And she was just like looking at the machine like, no, you're not having a contraction. No, it's fine to check you. You're not having a contraction. I'm like, I know what I'm feeling. How are you going to tell me what I'm feeling? But nevertheless, she didn't listen. She checked me. Now I'm 3 centimeters. So in the roughly 2.5 hours that I've been there, I went from 2 centimeters to 3 centimeters. And that means from the morning when I was at the other hospital, I was 1 centimeter to now 2 centimeters to 3 centimeters. So I know I'm progressing. And I'm like, you guys are really ignoring it. Contractions still consistent. And they decide at 3 centimeters to discharge me. And I'm like, so when do I come back? What's my sign for, okay, come back? Because 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, I'm fully effaced. My contractions are every 3 minutes. And they was like, well, you have to be being a little bit further in labor for us to keep you. And she basically was like, well, you can take a Benadryl at home and that should take the edge off of the contractions. And I'm just like, that don't make no sense. And it was just like, okay, I couldn't even formulate thoughts. It was so much pain from the contractions. And so I was like, okay, whatever. I got discharged from the hospital at around 12, got home. My mother's house was a block away from the hospital. So got home, 12 something, and they had to literally walk me from the car to the house. I was in so much pain. And they were just like, okay, well, we'll see when he wants to come. And I went to my room and I just was trying to relax. My mother made me relaxing tea. And I drank the whole thing and I was just trying to relax. And it just felt like it just got even more painful. Like the contractions were like what they call coupling, which means that they are coming on top of each other. So it's like a really bad contraction and then a bad contraction, a really bad contraction, then a bad contraction. And I was getting no relief. Like nothing would relieve it. I would try to stretch, nothing would relieve the pain. And I didn't even know what I'm supposed to do. This is my first baby. They sent me home saying I'm not in labor, but I know instinctively that I am in labor. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to try to take a shower. I left out my room. I walked a little bit and I felt myself push a little bit. And I'm like, what? What am I pushing? I didn't even think about it. Like I was in denial, full on denial. Like I'm not pushing right now. I'm brushing that off. I'm not pushing. And I walked more into the bathroom and I pushed a little bit more. And I'm like, okay, no, I'm not pushing. No, that's crazy of me. And then I got into the shower. And when I got into the shower, I don't even remember like thinking to do it. It's just like something instinctively took over my body and I started to get down on my hands and knees. And my boyfriend came in and was just like, what is going on? What are you doing? And I'm like, at that point, I was like, okay, this is go time. And I looked at him and I said, the baby's coming. And he quickly got me out the shower, got me back to the room, got me into the bed, and was like, okay, what you want to put on? Let's get you to the hospital. And I just looked at him like, no, we're not going to make it to the hospital. I was like, call an ambulance. Call an ambulance. He calls my mother. And then as he called my mother, and she's coming running to my room. Anybody who knows my mother, she has bracelets on her hands. So all I hear is her bracelets moving really fast. So I register she's running to my room and that he called her. Then he called the ambulance. And my mother gets to the room and I'm just like, Mommy, the baby's coming. And my boyfriend's on the phone with the ambulance and they're like, is the baby out? And I'm like, all they could see was white because my water never broke. So my son is still in his amniotic sac trying to come out. And I'm not trying to push. So they're trying to explain that to her. Meanwhile, ambulance is en route. And it was kind of like I was like coming in and out. And my mother was hitting my leg, trying to keep me up. And I'm just saying, Mommy, pray for me. Mommy, pray for me. And she's praying and I'm just like, oh my God. So she goes and turns on spiritual music and comes back. And I'm just like trying to keep myself like aware. And then at that time, the ambulance finally came. My my boyfriend goes to get the ambulance to bring them to my room, come in the house, and all I remember is the ambulance, the paramedic came in and he was so sweet and he was like, all right, let's get you to the hospital. And I'm like, catch my baby. Because in my mind, I had to wait for Christian to get back because my main thing was I don't want him to miss the birth of his first son. So as soon as he came back at my side, I saw a paramedic and I was like, catch my baby. I pushed and I looked at my boyfriend and said, I don't know if I can do this. He wiped the sweat off my head and said, you got this. And I pushed one more time and my son burst the amniotic sac and like just slid out like with the quickness. Like that was it. So that was just, that was an experience in itself. Now, after he came out, I'm all like, it's like you're delirious a little bit. And I'm just like, oh my God, he's here. Like, what? Like, I can't even believe I just gave birth in my room on my bed. Like, after birth, everything on my bed. Like, this is it. And it's crazy because I had just bought a new comforter set and I was over with. Like, that was it. It was done. That was it. But after I gave birth to him, the paramedics are all talking and chatting it up and thing and cutting his umbilical cord and wrapping him up in the blanket thing to keep him warm, gave him to Christian, my boyfriend. And I'm just like, okay, I'm still having a contraction, guys. And now I had a moment of fear because also throughout my whole pregnancy, all my blood work, everything was showing that I was carrying twins. And every time I used to have to get ultrasounds every week because they kept telling me there's a baby behind him. It has to be. It has to be a baby behind him. It has to be. Because he was already big. And they were just like, no, it has to be a baby behind him. So when I was still having contractions, I'm like, oh my God, there's another baby that had to come out. Oh my God. But then they were like, no, you have to push out the placenta. So I did end up, when I realized that, I was just like, oh, nobody told me. And then I just was like, one good little oomph, and it just came out. That was such an experience. And after that, they packed us up and then took us to the hospital that I had just left a hour before. He was born at 1 something. I got home at 12 something from the hospital. So everyone was still on the same shift. I still had on my same hospital band. And when I got there, I looked at the doctor like, I told you I was in labor. I told you I was going to give birth. And she was just like, oh my God, I didn't know. Like, this is your first baby. And I just told her, well, that's why you should listen to the person that's in labor, because I know what I was feeling. And yeah, that was a very interesting, like, story. On my first baby, like, to go through that, like, it was so crazy. But it really shows me how every birth is different. Yeah. So that was my story for my first pregnancy, labor and delivery. So I hope you guys enjoyed. You can like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.